Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion, and our second hour is something we want to spend a little more time on today. We're going to have Ryan Summers. He is the creative director for SPILLT, so stay tuned for that. He's got a long, storied past. And so it's going to be really fun to talk to him about the process of design. So stay tuned for that. Remember to ask your questions in Mukana. You can ask the questions in Mukana. You can vote those questions up. Voting is important. We've got a lot of questions, and it's really important for you to tell us which ones you want us to talk about more. We tend to talk about the questions at the beginning a little longer than the questions at the end. So it really makes a difference for you to ask those questions. Also, if you're not in Mukana, you're just watching the show any time of the day, even if you're watching a rerun of this some other time. Do we really call it reruns or do we call it VODs? Anyway, if you are watching it later, you can always use this askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global. You can ask questions 24/7, and we will feed them into the system. Let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Bill, what do we have?
We start with Chris Fenwick, who's throwing a Cochrane to himself in Emeryville, California. Shorts, how do they work?
Chris?
So Alex, in one of his insomniac moments, sent me a link in the middle of the night last night. He's like, look what I figured out how to do. No,
everybody's been figuring it out. It was just that I didn't. It was, so we've been.
Okay, so let me break it down first. So we record a 2-hour show here every day.
Yeah.
Every day. And there is a feature in the YouTubes where you can share a video like, hey, John, I watched this video. You should watch it. But you can also do a thing called a clip. Now, when you make a clip, I'm getting there, Alex. When you make a clip, it allows you to select a portion of a longer video and say, hey, check out this little clip. And it makes a URL for it that you can share. And it's quite handy. But when you share that clip, it is a portion of the long video, and the viewer who receives that clip can rewind to the beginning and watch the whole show. Now, we've talked about in the past, one way to help promote the show is to make shorts. And
right now, Robert Sababity is like he's just like, I've been talking to you guys about this for months. So anyway, I just want to let you know, Robert, that I hear you, Robert. I just know Robert's been talking to me specifically about it for months. So, sending me tests and me going, no, not that yet.
And I understand the super source thing and the stuff and the whatever, but so Opus has the ability to take a video, and I don't really know how it works, but I know that Jonas has been talking about it for over a year. But normally, it sends you a 1-minute file or a link. I don't know how it works. Anyway, what you sent me, Alex, was the Toad video, the guy from Toad.
Toad the Wet Sprocket. Glenn
Sorry.
Phillips.
But it was within the context of the whole show. So it wasn't just a guy singing, and because when you do a clip in YouTube, you can only send like 30 seconds or something.
Right.
But it was basically the portion of the show, but it was more than just a 30-second clip. My question to you: how's that work? What's going on?
Yeah. So what happens is that I took the whole clip. What happened here is I already downloaded the whole clip because I had to fix some stuff in it and put it back up again. And if you're watching this, please go watch the Glenn Phillips one. In addition to being probably one of the best episodes we've ever done as far as a second hour, it is. I'd really like to push the views back up because we lost our live because I had to edit it. So anyway, our live numbers. And so anyway, so what you do is I took the whole thing and I just threw it in Opus, and it's free for 90 minutes of processing. So I just was like, we'll see what happens here. And I threw it in, and it came back with, let me see if I can show you. Hold on, I can just show you what
the way
it looks
Opus
like
works
here.
Is you send it a link to a YouTube video, and it analyzes it?
Yeah, you can send a link. I didn't. I just uploaded the file. So I just literally uploaded the file to it and said, here's the file. And because what I did is I edited out for our questions at the beginning because I didn't want to pay for that. So anyway, so what I did is I have what I have here is this is kind of what it pumps out. So I literally just threw it in, and again, this is what Robert had been doing. Jonas does. So it just starts grabbing stuff, and saying, these are all things that I think would be, there's a longer recording or this is a longer question from Alexander. These are all things that it just kind of hung together, and it says, what the score is, and it kind of scores them up. But it's using large language models to analyze what we're doing and make decisions about what's good. And what I did is I went through here. Now I can go in and I can say, well, this isn't exactly what I want. So I click here, and now I can go in here and see what's there.
You can pick the colors?
I could probably change the colors. Yeah. I didn't. Yeah, you can change the colors. I haven't bothered to do that yet. I don't want. Yeah. So I can go in here and click on this and say, no, I want this to be, white or whatever.
So it only has yellow and green.
Yeah, it probably has a lot of other things. I literally I'm less than 12 hours into this app, so I like since I opened it, like I've got about an hour of working in it, and so anyway, so you can see, but you can go like, so I actually want to keep this part in, so it shows you the other parts that it's working with here. I want to keep this part in, so you click here and you say set as end, and so then it just now it's got more video. It's going to run through that, and you can, but you say, I don't want this, like I can select like this section and say, I don't really want that in there. So I can take that out. And so it'll cut from here to here. Now, my complaint in the past with Opus is that it creates these, you can hear the snaps when it cut. It's gotten much better. Like it's definitely, like I could hear these little bumps.
About 0-point editing, yeah.
Yeah, and so it has gotten much better at doing that analyzation. Now, the other thing the problem that I really had, and what we didn't, part of why I used Glenn as a test here, was because he was framed so well in his frame. Like, he was centered, he had it all set up, so it wasn't going to be a lot of work to throw it together. And I was like, Glenn is so good at talking about things that I knew that there'd be a lot of clips. And so it found, 33 clips from that show, from just the second hour, that it liked, or it had some version of that. And I picked about 4 or 5 of them and threw them into our shorts as a test. And it's really interesting. So again, the reason that we haven't done it up until now is because I wasn't getting, and even in a couple of Glenn's, I wasn't getting clean frames, and it was very jarring to go to our super source and see like weird lines and see stuff that's showing up or things that are not there. And so I was like, this isn't really what I want. And so I kept on pushing back because it just didn't look very good. And then what I've been doing in the back end is talking to the production team and looking at, like for instance, John Wallace is now recording, he's testing these records that are active speaker only. So he's recording only the active speaker out of Zoom, so that whoever's talking is just sitting, we only get what's talking. There's no extra stuff. There's no super sources. There's no nothing. And so that's going to make it easier for us to cut those. I've got some other ideas of how to build some behaviors I'm going to talk to Andy about that can really build something up where it gives us, like for instance, I have this idea of having 4 streams that I hand it that are the 4 people, like there's 4 recorders or 4 records going on, and it's just the 4 people who raise their hand. It just switches the output. So when we hit it, because we have that information, we just record them through the entire, all of them through the entire thing. So when you look at the edit, it'll look weird because it'll just be these 4 and then these 4 and then these 4 and then these 4. But the idea is it'll hand us the content. What I'm really looking at is the ability to hand the content to the system in a way that will give it the most, because the other thing it'll do is it's actually cutting around things, and it'll insert somebody else back in to cut around. And so if I give it all 4 of the people that could possibly answer it, and it has just someone nodding, it'll go to them so that they can get from one place to another. Like it does some pretty smart, things. And so, but the idea that we could, and again, it was like the part that I couldn't figure out was how do we get clean frames? Like that was the thing that bothered me. I just didn't want to, I have this concern about kind of the junkification of content, which is that you just start spewing things into the ether. But when I looked at some of the stuff that it pulled out of Glenn's interview, I was like, that's a really good clip that no one's ever going to see if they try to watch through the whole thing. I mean, a lot of people just aren't going to watch the whole show. Let's put these out as clips so people just get those. And the same way with our answers, let's put out, the clips so that we could put out, I think we're going to, if we get this working, we're probably going to end up putting out 8 to 10 clips a day. Just extractions of those. It's an enormous amount of content that we're generating, and for all of you that are just banging your head against the screen talking about, I've been talking to Alex about this.
I
for a
told you
long
this
time.
3 years ago.
I hear you.
It's the Joe Rogan
I know.
model.
It is. It's just that there's a resource problem. Like, who's going to do it? And until Opus was doing a year ago, it was not the same as it is now. Like, when I opened it up, the last time I looked at it, I was like, well, this is kind of dorky. Like, it was not doing a very good. I didn't think it was doing a very good job. What I did last night in a half an hour, I was like, okay, that's and I can go through and one of my complaints about Opus or things that are generated by Opus is that it gets the words wrong a lot. And now I understand how to put it in, how to go in and like Strata. It keeps on saying Strata with a T, because I had it analyze Michael Cioni's show, because he's so good at sound bites. Like, I was like, oh, his thing will go rock, but it keeps. So I have to go in and retype Strata, in every time he said it. But it's still worth it, and it's anyway. And I don't want to do it forever. So hopefully we'll find a team that will want to work on these. But the point is that I need to understand it. Sometimes I need to do it to understand it.
So I want to push back a little bit on one thing. So, but the Glenn Phillips clip that you posted on Twitter early this morning or last night, I guess, was a portion of the 2-hour show.
I didn't clip it out. Yeah, I didn't clip it out.
So was that done by Opus as well? So how did you do that when it was more than a 30-second clip?
Magic. Yeah, no. So in YouTube, you can go to anything that you want to share, and when you click on while it's playing, you get to where you want it to go, and you hit share, and it'll pop open and it'll say, "Do you want to include the time?" And you turn time on, and that's just in seconds. And so what you can do is I grab that share link and then I put it back in the URL. And it's never quite right. It's wherever you hit it. But I just start changing the seconds at the end until I get to exactly what I want. I just, noodle with it back 5, up 10, whatever. And then I share that. The advantage of that is that you get those views are registered to the whole clip. And if they see the whole clip and they want to watch it, they don't have to find it. It's right there. Like, I'm going to give you and so that's a different, and we'll probably use that more. I mean, one of the things that I'm really interested in this year is taking full advantage of YouTube, because it is the best media platform at the moment, and so what I want to do is make sure that our shows are being, considered as podcasts. We're doing the long form, we're doing clips, we're sharing, specific things that are interesting. And the best thing that, if you're watching, the best thing you can do is when you see those pop up is like them so that we can manipulate the algorithms within Twitter and LinkedIn and stuff like that. So
does Opus give you a file back then?
Yeah. You just hit download.
Go upload?
Yeah. So you just, so if you just right here, once you've got it done, I guess you can export. They got some deal with Premiere, but you can just hit here. So you can edit it. You can share it directly is the share here. And you can edit it. And you can see I have 58.
What do those 3 dots mean? What's that first icon?
That's usually a share icon. Hold on, let's see.
Oh, okay.
Auto
I also want to point
scheduler.
out that the trick that Alex said about clicking the timestamp, that, as far as I know, that only works on a desktop machine. I know it doesn't work on the iOS device. I don't know about Androids.
I watch very little YouTube on iOS devices, and so I have to admit that it's just not my behavior. So
I watch so much on my phone. I'm going to look up how much screen time. It's hours a day.
It's really a minor. What's funny is we do find it interesting. I watch. It's the way I watch. I think it's just easier for me to watch on the desktop. But I also watch. I probably watch 80% of my viewing is on my TV. Like I sit down and watch it on my TV because it's easier for me to skip through it's actually easier for me to skip quickly to what I want on the TV than it is on the it's just easier, like I'm very, very good with my little simple Apple controller that isn't the new one. I am like ninja with it. So about moving through things. Go ahead, Jeff.
On that issue, I'll say I mean, that is actually one of the reasons probably why I consume, I don't know, like 95% of my YouTube consumption is on iOS and specifically my phone. It's a separate screen, and it's how you're consuming it. I'm usually consuming this stuff while multitasking and doing other things. But the beauty is you can just anywhere on the left, you double tap on the left side of the screen and it backs up, and double tap on the right side, it skips forward. It's super handy. But so with Opus, now, is it your understanding that it is making these decisions based purely on the text that it is transcribed, or you're saying it seems to be taking visual elements into consideration as well?
I think it appears that it cuts around things, and it looked like it was actually cutting around things that I didn't mean for it to do. Like, it inserted things that didn't belong there, but made sense to have it there. But it was like, because it's rearranging things a little bit. And so it looked like it looked like it was cutting around when it wanted to do, and I don't know this for sure, maybe someone at Opus is like, no, we don't do that at all. But what it looked like to me when I was watching it was that it was it cut a part where it cut Bill in and then cut around and then cut back to Glenn. And the Bill thing, when I looked at the edit, that was like not part of that string, but it did it really seamlessly. And again, I'm just going to keep on experimenting with it a little bit. My goal is to experiment with it a little bit and then have us find a team that wants to do this, so that every day we pump out a bunch of these. Because I think that when we look at providing the content that we're providing, finding other avenues for it would be useful. And this could be also a TikTok feed and, that kind of thing. So it's,
and what's interesting, the reason I ask is because I've been playing with this in Descript, and it'd be interesting if we do a head-to-head competition, feed them both the same content and see what they come up with. Descript, certainly what it does is it does the transcription, and then it does its analysis and decisions based on the transcription.
Yeah, and Descript is the one that had is it doing better at the 0 point editing? Like it was like really clicky before.
The zero crossing, yes, they do. They do and it's interesting, their explanation is not actually that they make cuts at zero crossing, but they add what they have termed micro fades to every cut. Yeah. So, what presumably fade out, fade in.
Because it didn't seem like it was, when I heard the earlier test that we did with the Michael Krasny show, it didn't feel like that was what was happening. And so that's why I was like, oh, I can't listen to these with clicks in them.
Maybe they've improved that, but that is what they do, and it's still not always perfect, but more often than not, it does.
Maybe it was just the ones I heard, but I was like, I cue off on that pretty quickly, and so I was just like, I can't have a lot of that.
And what I'm saying would be interesting comparison is just purely their decisions on if fed a 2-hour or 1 hour show.
We should definitely do head to heads, because it's really it's an interesting puzzle. But I do think it's a because the idea of having us actually go through and clip these out was like, I can't do that, like by hand. Like, we don't have anybody to do that, and we're not going to put somebody on that. But the idea that we can grab...
Does it let you feed it multiple video tracks?
I think it says up to 7. And so I haven't... I thought it was up to 7 sources that it said you can throw in there, and I'm not 100% sure. I know that Descript will do multiple tracks, for that, and so it'll do things where it does over-unders and all kinds of other stuff in there. We had Descript on here, and I thought that it was good. Opus is funny. Was funny, and if Descript did the same quality, I would probably move to Descript, only because Descript has been super responsive to talking to us, and Opus won't return my emails. So I'm using it specifically just because I talked to some folks about it and they liked it better. But if I felt like we get more support from one side or the other, I would probably pick the one where we get more support. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, you said, and I didn't, it struck me that YouTube doesn't keep, if you replace your video, all the stats existing. I'm so used to Vimeo, which keeps them. Yeah, really, that's interesting, because that's important. It's not that important. I mean, like, it's not that important for most shows. This show specifically, it's important because we want to, bring other artists in. We want to have it be a number that isn't, as low. I absolutely
get
that.
If you're watching, go watch it for a little while. Just watch it.
My concern is that when you use Vimeo as a content distribution network, I have clients always asking for little changes, so I'm constantly
you can't do that. The reason that they don't do that is so that, YouTube, the problem is that if you uploaded something, got a huge following, got it going in the algorithm, and then changed the fundamental meaning of the video, it'd be problematic for them.
Right.
So because they're running ads against it and all kinds, you could do it. There's a lot of manipulation that could happen if that happened, and so there is, so that's why you can clip the ends, but you can't, and you can, I think, blur things out, but you can't like cut things out of the middle without giving it up. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
There you go. Yeah.
And then one last thing, because Chris mentioned not being able to do the time-coded URL, Chris, is I specifically wrote a shortcut to be able to do that. So I can, because I do that often actually, so I can start the process to share out a YouTube video, but run it through my shortcut, and it will create a time-coded URL, using the short link that then I can then just share that URL.
And there is our mini second hour that we've now done 17 minutes on. It was worth it though. It was good. It was a good conversation. It was good. Next question.
My bad. Sorry.
It's all good.
Next one comes from James Babbitt in San Diego, and James says, to use a Countryman H6 mic with a powered loudspeaker that doesn't have phantom power, which phantom power supply would the panel recommend?
Good, Bill.
Well, it depends on whether you need something to sit on a desk and be plugged in all the time, in which case there are tons of simple little phantom power supplies you can get everywhere. If you want it to like go field recording and things like that, I've been using the XV for a long time. I think these things are really nicely designed. They're very stable. Here's what it looks like on their website. It does 48 or 12-volt phantom power, and I was shocked. I went looking for it 2 minutes ago, and I knew the drawer I keep it in. I haven't touched it in like 5 or 6 months. I turned it on, and it came completely back to life with almost a full battery. So it's a pretty robust system. Puts out a good 48 volts of phantom power, and if I'm working in the field and I just want this to last maybe 2 hours or something like that, it's pretty darn good.
A mixer. Put a mixer in there. Do not connect your mic directly to your amp. Like you wanna put a mixer in there. Like put a mixer in between the amp and the. I would highly recommend you a powered loud. You're talking about connecting a mic directly to a powered loudspeaker. Don't do that. So you want to put a mixer in between. Even like for the same price you get a 48 volt insert. You could get a Behringer for $50 Yamaha $50 mixer. That's better than trying to do what you're doing. So I would highly recommend putting a little mixer in between your mic, and then all those little mixers will have 48 volt, and you'll plug it in, and then they'll have outputs that you put into the speaker, and then you're going to have the control you need for a mic. So anyway, that'd be my recommendation. Next question.
Next one comes from Funsak Georgi in Dharamshala, India. Hi, panelists. I was asked to help a teacher taking a mind training over Zoom. How to get rid of noises of children outside and occasional barking dogs. Treat the room or invest in gears. He's got a Shure SM58 or a Sennheiser EV100G3 lab mic. Oh, he doesn't have them. He's looking for recommendations on which of those. Thanks.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, the question is interesting because if I'm understanding it correctly, this teacher is the student, not the teacher, and to me, those are two very different situations.
Right. Well, I think it's a teacher, but that happens to be in training. Like it's think that they're somebody, but
right. For the purposes of this person is the student, and therefore less critical, in my opinion, to do all this stuff, just a good pair of noise-canceling headphones so that they're not experiencing it as much.
No, I think that they're doing it over Zoom. The teacher is somewhere else. Like the teacher is somewhere else, and they're getting trained from Dharamshala. And so the question is that how do you, for the teacher who's getting trained, we'll say the student, is somewhere else in the world over Zoom. Mm-hmm. And you have a teacher that's in Dharamshala, and they are talking to that person over Zoom, and there's just a lot of extraneous noise,
so the teacher has the noise. I mean, if that's the case, then
it's being
of course
fed into the mic. Yeah, so the people who it's a little, but I think that's what he's talking about. There's a very high level teacher in that. I don't know if it's that person, but there's a very high level teacher that's in Dharamshala. So
if that is in fact the question of how to get all that stuff out from the person who is teaching this class or the teacher in this scenario, then of course, I mean all of the standard things mentioned apply is then, yes, ideally treat this situation. It's a matter of what you want to spend on, everything that has been spoken about a lot, mics, probably a dynamic mic where you can get up close, and to what extent you can treat the room is good, followed by, as a last resort, with what you do first to treat the room and the equipment, is then you can run through some plugins. Arguably, turning on just the normal Zoom audio is probably fine and sufficient for getting rid of, really extraneous occasional noises like that as well.
There you go, Chris.
What I do is I have a powered speaker outside and a sound file that I trigger off of a Stream Deck, and it's my voice, and it just yells, "Get off my lawn!"
That doesn't work. So anyway, yeah. So so I think that there's a couple things that you want to look at. It depends on how many windows and what a lot of buildings, if they're thicker and they have just windows, a little bit of cover over those windows will go a long way. Stopping the air movement can really make a huge impact on how much you hear. Now, because a lot of walls in that area are, tend to be, concrete and thick and, other things like that. And then there's windows. And so it's a little easier to cut that out. If they're thinner walls and it's coming through all of that, it's not going to really matter. The thing about a headset mic, so I wouldn't use a lav. A lav, Omni Lav is probably not going to be a great solution. I would think about a headset mic because as you get closer, when you get the volume correct on the headset mic, you've turned it down so much that you're just not hearing a lot from outside. And so you're gonna knock a lot of that stuff out, even if it's an omnidirectional headset mic. That could work really well. And the problem with the SM58, which would have a lot of off-axis rejection, you probably cut out all of it if they're willing to hold on to something. But a lot of times a teacher, especially in the area that you're talking about, is not going to want to hold a mic. So that you could have a lav that's up near them, up near their mouth. It wouldn't be that much different than the headset. But a lot of them will wear headsets, and the key is it leaves their hands free to, put them down, to do a lot of other things that are there. So the hands free is kind of nice for the teachers, and them not having to be present to where to lean in or lean out or manage their mic is important in that area. I mean, in that vertical. So I think that I would really look at it. I mean, I would really look hard at a headset. You could do a lav, but I wouldn't probably use the lav mics that come with the Sennheiser EW100. They're kind of cheap, and they have this weird hollow sound that I don't like. So anyway, but there's lots of other mics you could plug into those as well. But those are things I would kind of think about. You can treat the room a little bit. If you're hearing it's roomy, then you want to soften the walls. If you're hearing the outside and it's just windows, then stop that air a little bit. That can be pretty simple. And then otherwise, I would think about a headset. You could do a lav, but I would pick the lav carefully, and that might help you a little bit. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer, Viera, Florida. Thoughts about the new Sony RE-C1000 pan-tilt zoom camera tracking appliance. This unit does all the subject auto tracking and more for a variety of cameras. The Sony has all sorts of demo slides listed there.
It looks like a good corporate and education solution. So basically what it does is it's a box that you kind of feed everything into. Let me see if I can pull this over here. So this is the box here from Sony. And what it's really designed as a 4K input, 1080p output so that it can do a lot of the panning and scanning for you. It can do some comping so that it can put things over top of folks. It can let you key you over slides or part of you over slides. You can see here where it's got, in this area, it has, this is the 4K shot and it's doing a punch in of that person. So those are all the kind of things that it can manage. So it can do, a lot of this auto tracking and so on and so forth. I think for what it does, it's probably very effective at that. I will say that I have never watched in my entire life more than about 5 minutes of that kind of content. Like literally, maybe even cumulatively, but definitely not. Like it's just so boring to watch. Like, and it's so hard. And I think that, like Yale puts these out and MIT puts them out and everyone, and you want to learn something. So you put them on like, oh, I'm going to learn something about physics or whatever. And wow, it's just so boring. And it's just, I'd rather watch grass grow, and so I think the problem is that we keep on trying to put lipstick on this pig, which is that we're going to put a camera in the back of the room while someone talks. It's just not very compelling. And, when we do eye tracking and other things that we did a lot of 15 years ago, just people just put it up, they're just listening to it, they're barely watching it. And I think that we really need to rethink. I'm just going to zigzag a little bit. I know that you probably have partners and within your company that all want to do this and it makes sense. But, I would highly recommend thinking about, content is easy to make or easy to watch. It is not both. And what you want to think about is, what does it take for a little extra effort to create something that people actually want to watch? Because you're no longer like the one student that was sick watching these. You're talking about 50 students in the room and potentially 500 or 5,000 or 50,000 people watching later. Maybe we should make the content for them, and so the thing is the content for them is something that is more like what we do in the show and being able to draw on a screen, because there's no reason for you to turn around if you have a telestrator in front of you. So there's not, like all of these things, like build the teacher system and let them just do the lecture one more time, but in front of a camera as opposed to in front of, the class. Have great audio, have a great camera, have all those other things. And I just think that we need to really rethink this whole, like, we're going to shoot in the classroom, because it's inflicting an enormous amount of boredom on a lot of people wantonly. And I just think that we need to really think about our life choices there. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I think, though, you may be a little bit bearing the lead about this. What interests me about it is that Sony has now a $2,500 AI-based system that is trying to solve one problem. I agree with you about the overview of whether these are good presentations. But if Sony is putting serious money into using AI to do this is called edge tracking or something like that. Edge analytics is what they're branding this as.
I guess
so. Maybe that'll show up in a camera or something else to do something different later on.
But all of it is just again putting sugar on mud. Like it's just and so
I understand. I agree with you.
But all of these things are going to be. So it's going to be at a conference and doing the same thing, like doing the auto thing here with the auto tracking and everything else. And I get it. People get into this. They want to have auto tracking for people on stage. They want to do all these things and make it easier. But it's all boring. It's all boring to watch. And it's, like Apple went away from doing things on stage. They're never coming back because they could never reproduce what they just started doing with those keynotes that they did during COVID. They're never going to go back to the stage, because I guarantee that if they did a test and they looked at it, they'd be like, oh, that looks really boring and slow now. Like what was the state of the art by their keynotes, they could never go back to, because Apple's, when they had all the money in the world, their keynotes were still boring too, And so the thing is that, and if Apple can't do it as well on stage and make it interesting, you're not going to be able to do it, because they had 10 times or 100 times more money than you did. And so, that's the problem, is that I think that there's a little bit of a, and I get it. It's part of the corporate culture and it's part of what we think is, but we just have to, every once in a while, we have to back up and understand that we're doing something really stupid, and we need to, hey, I get that we've all been doing it that way, but maybe this isn't the solution. Maybe we, and I think that we're going to look back at stage of, 10 years from now, we're going to look back at that, delivering things like this as, wow, I can't believe we did that for so long. It's not going to last in more than a decade. I promise you, as the audiences get bigger, and if you do real data, if you look at how long, we're going to buy an eye tracking system so I can start doing the research, so I can start showing you what happens when people watch it, because I've seen it. I know what happens because we did back then it was a $25,000 system that we rented and we sat down and we had everybody do it. Now it's like $2,500 or something like that. And I've seen the data, and the data is, I almost stopped making videos. I almost stopped doing what I did. It was so confronting. And so when you see the data, when we start publishing the data, it's going to poison the entire well, because people they don't want to watch this, and they and it's, that you get up there and, Samsung or Sony and now all of those people are like, what happened? They kind of backed up. No, Apple just started doing videos, and now everybody else is still doing stage stuff. And everyone's like, oh, that lost a lot of energy. They didn't lose any energy. They're the same as they were before. It's just that they were always boring. But now we get to watch a video for one company and watch boring stage events for the other companies, And so, yeah, go ahead, Chris.
was going to say, it's interesting. Apple, at some point in their history, decided to kill the floppy disk. They just pulled that out of the iMac. They pulled all the CD-ROMs out of everything. They killed their trade show business by opening up retail stores. Steve Jobs personified the keynote. I've had my clients say, I want to do a keynote as good as Steve. They even have an app called Keynote. Do you think they're killing the message of the keynote?
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to. I mean, the keynote, we still call it a keynote, but it's really just a movie about Apple's new products. It's a 1.5 hour commercial.
They need a new name.
Yeah, I think they'll
call it a keynote.
Because people are old, think old ways, and they don't understand, and so they could call it just the Apple event or the whatever. But it's and again, it's so much nicer to watch. And even then, even with all of making it nicer, like we all watch Apple's keynote, and all we care about is what are the specs on the camera. Like when we watch the iPhone one, like just if they publish it at the very beginning, we're like, okay, I can go on, I'll buy it. Yeah, sure, I got it. Next question.
Matthew LeCount in Oakland, California is up next. Need a simple starting soon splash page for live stream, but just using a camera into a live view solo. Thoughts on how to approach that?
Go ahead, Jeff.
And I'm sorry, is the live view solo, when you mentioned, is that hardware?
It's a piece of hardware that you plug the camera into. So the problem that they have right now is that inline he only has a camera and a solo, and he needs a starting soon slide. That's hard.
But the reason going into then
he's going
computer?
streaming straight to YouTube or something else. I mean, I think that he doesn't have anything in between. That's the challenge there. So the thing that you want to look at there is that it's not very hard to put something very small in between, like a little ATEM switcher. Or now what we do with the live views is we always bring them back to a master control somewhere where we can add those slides and add lower thirds and add those things to it. So I am assuming if you're asking us this, the solo is going directly to your CDN like YouTube or Facebook, or it is going to Now, the other thing to know is that LiveView has its own cloud infrastructure. And so you may want to look at the idea of having LiveView do that, so you can stream to their cloud infrastructure. There's editing and they can put in lower thirds and slides and everything else in the cloud. So that might be another way to do it. But the only, the way to do it, if you only have a camera and you can't insert that, the problem is that you're really, it's going to be janky if you're coming in from a camera. You can save a file and then hit play on the camera and let it, play it out or whatever. But then you still have to get back to the camera, where that transition's not going to be pretty. Go ahead, Jason.
I mean, let's start with this is a terrible idea, but you could always just shoot a monitor and loop that and, and then start your event.
But you could do that. I think that again, I would highly recommend. There's also, there are, little, trying to think of like monitors that will play something out. Like even if you ran it through a monitor, like a Blackmagic monitor or something like that, you can hit play on that and it would run that through, I think. But I think that really think about a switcher there. I know that you're trying to stay light, but otherwise, the other thing to think about is just running, rather than a starting soon, just run a wide shot of the room, people walking in, and then zoom in on it. It's not that, it's not that bad to do wide shots on those things. So you just kind of know that you're live in that area, but you really, somewhere you want to be able to add graphics. Go ahead, Chris.
The ATEM Ultra Mini has one button. It goes from a live pass-through, press the button, goes to a single frame. Press the button, goes back to the live pass-through. It's a new product. I'm working on it. Talking to Grant.
You don't have it yet. You don't have it. It's like, really?
I'm having lunch with Grant later this week.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, okay. Next question.
Christian Kohler in Somerset, New Jersey is up next. I'm looking for an audio interface for my MacBook M Pro M2. I'm seeing a lot of discussion about audio glitches and driver problems with various interfaces. I'm considering the Motu M2, Rodecaster Duo, and Arturio Mini Fuse. Any recommendations?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I'll say again, excuse me, the mention of Evo 8, it's my primary interface. And specifically, what I like about it and have found so beneficial is it is truly fully USB compliant. So not only can you just plug it in and it works, optionally you can use their software, or you can just use, they have a very nice software mixer, and you get more features in the software mixer for the Evo 8 than their smaller model, which is the Evo 4. But it is fully compliant, meaning when you use the Mac controls like volume, you're actually affecting the output setting from the interface itself. And conversely, if you do anything through the MIDI interface console in Mac OS, you're truly controlling the gain on this interface, and you can automate that as well. Every application will be able to control it. So it's a really nice and yet very small interface powered by over the USB.
Next question.
David Brady in New York City is up next, looking for recommendations on a USB cellular modem for use with a mobile encoder such as a YOLOBox, Cerevo Live Shell 10, or Magewell Director Mini.
Go ahead, Chris.
I don't remember what I was going to say. Oh, Keenan's modem, the disaster recovery group.
I think he wants to, rather than a whole box, what he's looking for are the little modems, that you would put into it. So these are like the little pop into the things. I don't think he's looking for another piece of hardware.
Understood, but you can buy just the modem from Keenan.
Okay.
It's got the 3 cards. It's got the little farm of antennas on the back.
But he doesn't want. I think that's not what he's looking for, though. I think that what he's looking for these are the USB with an antenna. It's basically an antenna into a USB that plugs into the YOLOBox or other things. So it's not another box. Like it's a thing that plugs in. I mean, I can
admit I was wrong, Alex. I'm okay. We can move on. It's okay. You don't have to soft sell it.
I'm just trying to answer the question now. So anyway, I think that the hard part is that they're all really difficult to work with unless you're going to do a long-term, so Verizon is typically the best one to work with if they're making those available. But you need to go a 1-year commitment to them before they're going to give you those. They really are a pain. I've mostly used MiFis, I have to admit, for these. And it's a little bit more work, but it allows me to use them in more places. Like the problem I really have with the little modems is that I can only use them for that box. So if I use MiFis, I can use them for lots of other things. And so typically if you're bonding them, then I'm going to look at, Verizon. If I'm going to pick one, I'm going to do Verizon. If I'm going to bond them, I'm obviously going to split that up among a couple different providers so that I can handle that. But one of the things you want to do is look at, if you have a couple phones or friends with different services, kind of know where you're going, because Verizon's good in some places and not good in others, and AT&T's good in other places, and T-Mobile is not really good anywhere. So anyway, it's always like T-Mobile's always like, oh, it's not working. I don't know why. So that's the challenge there. Next question.
Matthew LeCount in Oakland, California. Is it possible to password protect a live stream on YouTube? Not a paywall, but limited viewership.
You can set it up as a private stream. There's you have 3 options with YouTube. One is public, the other one is unlisted, and the other one is private. If you have it as public, everyone can see it, and it's published. If you have it as unlisted, no one can see it unless they have the URL. So if you send someone the URL, but anybody with the URL can see it. If you do private, you can send invites. It has a section in there where you can send it, and it used to be up to 50. I think they've increased that number up to 50 people, but I think they've increased the number to something else. And now you can, they have to use that email to get in, but you can limit it to that viewership. So those are your 3 options with YouTube to do that. So it's not a paywall, but it does limit we use private a lot when we're doing rehearsals. Like we give it to 1 or 2 clients, and they have to log in to do those kinds of things if they want to see it remotely. Next question.
John Prado in Las Vegas. And from the panel here, usually, according to The Verge's review of Apple's Vision Pro, you can only launch one Mac OS window in the environment, which was a letdown for me, at least. Thoughts?
Go ahead, Chris.
John wanted me to make sure that I clarified this. It is John's thought that he can put the goggles on, have multiple Macs, and see multiple Mac displays inside the goggles, and he's seeing it more of like almost like an iOS device. Also, just want to let you know, I broke down and I ordered some goggles. We'll see.
Great. Go ahead, Bill.
So I just wanted to note, I was lucky enough to stumble into my original Mac, which is over my shoulder back there, in 1984. And it didn't do much, but what it did fascinated me. And then I also got the original iPhone. I got the original iPod. I got all those things because I was interested. None of them did very much when you look at it in hindsight. They were all version 1 things, but some of them ended up changing much about my life and how I approached content creation and things. So version 1 of the things are going to have lots of flaws, and they're not going to be perfect, but it's showing you, I think, what could happen if you decide to listen to that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think that a lot of those things will move over time. It'll get better, and again, it will. I think it'll do a lot when it comes out of the gate. I'm sure that there's some handshake issues that it needs to kind of figure out over time as far as how to do multi-tenancy. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, has anyone ever had to deal with assistive listening systems in a venue? What audio mix do you usually feed them? The venue mostly hosts concerts, but also the occasional theatrical play and film showing, and I apologize for the lawn crew.
Yeah, we haven't used a specific brand over and over and over again for these. And so for these, and I'm not sure whether you're talking about interpretation or whether you're talking about descriptive audio. And so those are, but typically what happens is that when you register for some of these things, we usually ask, you usually get a request, do you need assistive, do you need any assistance? And then you put it in, and when we know we have a certain number of people that need to be supported that way, something infrastructure is set up for that to happen. And so that's kind of how we approach, that process. But it depends on, and again, it's also, if it's sight impaired, then, if it's sight impaired, we would do a descriptive audio. If it's hearing impaired, then we would use obviously have ASL there. Next question.
Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada is up next. If I record my song vocals on my MV7 Shure mic through an XLR as compared to the USB, will my vocals sound much different based on the wire going into my MixPre 3 connected to my M2 Mac Mini?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Potentially, and that's obviously less of an issue of whether or not you're using the USB functionality of the mic versus just going out to the XLR. It's the fact that you can do all the things you can do on your MixPre. So whether it's noise assist or anything else you're doing with that. So, I mean, anything that goes through a different processor will sound different.
Yeah, I think I believe that it sounds better coming through the XLR than it does I think that the preamp inside of the microphone is not as good. The conversion to the A to D converter in the microphone is not as good as what you have in the MixPre, and I think it does sound superior. Next question.
Another QR code question coming in. Scott Pulsifer in Philadelphia. Which one do you recommend to upgrade a naive user's feed to us? And he's prioritizing easy over good. The cameras could be a Canon M50 Mark II, a Sony, or a webcam or something else.
I think that it is if you have a new user that's doing this, the easiest thing is to give them a webcam, and the easiest one there is probably a Brio that they're going to be able to put up. Anything else is going to take some more work. The next step up would probably be a link from Insta360, so that would be but as soon as you start getting to the larger cameras, you do want to look at some of the Sony cameras like the E10. Because what it's going to do is actually give you a USB output. So trying to keep them from having to go through another interface. Next question.
Next one comes from Chris Widener in Indianapolis, Indiana. Chris's question is LTO drives. What is the current best value to LTO 7? I need more long-term space, but I'm really debating on the value proposition of a larger tape.
Go ahead, Chris.
Hey, Chris, unless you're contractually bound to use LTO for some reason for archiving, I had an LTO many years ago, and the first time I had to pull something out, I had put a lot of stuff on it, but I had a whole shelf full of tapes. First time I tried to pull something off of it, crashed, didn't work. Hard drives are cheap. Just keep the drives.
Yeah, I will say, I will agree that I do not like LTOs because I've lost enough data on LTOs to survive a whole lifetime, because you put so much on them, and then if something goes wrong with that tape, it's a lot of data on there. So if you're going to do an LTO, you need two of them because you need to have a primary backup, and then it's a very custom system that you need to be able to read and so on and so forth. With a raw drive, what I've done, like Chris, for many, many years is get drives, and there's usually, if you look at the price of drives per terabyte, you'll see this thing where it goes like this, right? So wherever this is, and sometimes that used to be 500 gigs, now it's like, I don't know, 12 terabytes or something like that. That there's a point where it arcs up in the cost of the drive. Buy them right below that, and then we back things up to those all the time. I mean, it's terabytes and terabytes and terabytes, of data. I mean, I was generating, I don't know how much content you're generating, but I was generating, between 5 and 10 terabytes a week for years. And we were just pumping them in there, and we had a primary and a backup drive. And we used the CD scanner or whatever to index them. We could find anything we had done in the last decade in 15 minutes, and have it online. It was just, and so I don't, LTO, I just remember spending a lot of time waiting for the stuff to get de-arced and then also not getting it. So I'm not a big fan. Next question.
Craig Kadoki in Toronto, Canada. As a group, we've talked about health strategies for the way we work. What will those using Vision or other AR goggles be doing for eye health, especially since your eyes never change from a very short focal distance inside the goggles?
Harshid?
I think a simple solution to this is just about time management. As much as we spend 8 hours a day at the workplace, we always have 15-minute breaks in between and then lunch. So with anything like this, keeping good time management on how much you use it and focusing on different devices, like something away from you, and then looking back at the goggles might just give you a little bit better eye health.
I go, Bill.
I'm not sure how the parallax works for this, but it's interesting. It's a virtual big screen off in the distance often. And it'd be interesting to talk to an optometrist about whether or not that gives you the sense or the musculature or the refocusing on your visual side so that you see various depths and it becomes not a problem. It'd be interesting to talk to somebody about that.
Go, Jeff.
And I'll quickly caution folks, a couple of years ago I was considering getting LASIK surgery finally, and no doctor could definitively tell me if that will affect my ability in the future to use technology like this where your focus up close is critical. So I opted not to get it. And I would just caution people at least to consider it, talk to your doctor if you're considering it and would like to use technology like this.
And also just all these screens are doing damage to your eyes. So it's, and there's a reason that they've gone to dark mode, and it's not just to save battery. It's that the white mode is bad for you, like bad for your eyes. And no one wants to talk about that, but they're they try to do those things. That's also, I mean, my phone is on warm unless I need to check color. Like it is like, I just, the blue, it's the blue. It is really not good for you. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I'll also say that focal length is important. In my edit system, my second display it's about that much further away than the primary monitor. So as I glance to the other monitor, it forces my eyes to refocus. I was having this discussion with my sister-in-law the other day. She's like, oh, I think I might finally need to get glasses. She's in her late 40s. And I told her, I said, when you read your phone, put your hand in different locations. Don't just sit where it's comfortable because your eyes get tired. Your eyeballs, I don't know, something like 32 little muscles in your eye socket or something like that. I don't know what it is. I'm probably totally wrong. But they are muscles. They have to be exercised. And we sit, besides the color of the light, which of course is an issue too. And, you got guy with those yellow glasses. I don't understand that. But change the focal length. Change the focal length a lot.
Next question.
Next one comes from Jeff Veely in Henderson, Texas. The panel recently recommended an Omni pickup panel for the Countryman ISOMAX. Why is this the best choice for a semi-treated environment over a cardioid? It seems it would be more likely to pick up unwanted room noise.
I go, Chris.
Jeff, you're exactly right. The Omni will pick up unwanted room noise. You're 100% right. But the cardioid can get bumped. It could get bumped because a cardioid has a very
well, and this
narrow
is the
pickup.
Countryman, so I think this is a headset. So I think that it comes down. I mean, so I don't think. I mean, it can get bumped still, but I don't think that. I think what we're talking about.
They do this thing.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest complaint about the cardioids is that the sibilance is so bad in a car. The sibilance is already a challenge with regular headsets, and when you turn it onto a cardioid, it's just really hard to filter that out. And that's the real challenge with those. Next question.
Next question comes from Craig McFarland in Boston, Massachusetts. How many in the panel or the Office Hours community are getting a Vision Pro on Friday?
I go, Jason.
I am. Fenwick apparently is, or I don't know about. Fenwick probably isn't on Friday. Wait. I know Alex is.
Yeah, I'm going to get one.
So I have connections. I think I'll have mine by Friday.
Oh, nice. So I am. When we get it in the afternoon, I'll try to jump in and we'll test it. What we want to do is try to test it and see if I can jump in as a character.
Yeah,
whatever.
I'll do the same.
I'm going to try to do the whole show on Saturday with it on. We'll see if it works. It could be super weird, but I feel like that's the test: is how weird will it be? And then I will probably never do it again. But I'm doing it as an experiment, so you'll get to see it. Next question.
Paul Wallace, Starling Plaza, Texas. What headset is this? And he's got a link there. It sounds really good. Announcer at the Chiefs game.
Yeah, I looked at this. By the way, please either put them somewhere else or don't put Facebook things up. It means I have to figure out my login and everything else. My request is not to link to Facebook, just because it's really hard for me to get to it. And so let's see here. So this is the headset that he's talking about here. So this is, oops, get that right? Yeah. This is the headset. So, I couldn't quite make out. It looks a little like a lot of different headsets. I couldn't quite find one that looked exactly like this. I thought that I was going to be able to tell it what it is. It is Mitch, so it's just his name, I'm guessing. It does start to look like a Sheps a little bit, like this is a really big pickup. So it could be a Sheps. It could be there's both Sennheiser, Shure, both make ones that are similar to that. And for some reason, I'm unable to log into the regular chat. Anyway, so those are my guesses. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Chris Widener in Indianapolis, Indiana. QR codes on signs don't seem to generate much traffic. What's your go-to for signage to drive traffic from a physical location to your socials or websites? We're looking at getting a portable digital billboard truck.
Go ahead, Chris.
Dude, I want to drive that billboard truck. That sounds fun. So, Chris, I'm interested in the data that you have that says it doesn't get work. And the reason I ask is my wife is decidedly non-tech. She is very much anti-technology. But she sees those crazy QR codes pop up like on TV shows and stuff like that. And although she doesn't grab for her phone, I always get punched. She's like, oh, scan the thing. So I have to have my phone constantly at the ready. But I think because of COVID, menus, restaurants, no touchy, I think the QR code is much more popular today than it was 5 years ago.
Go ahead, Jason.
I think Fenwick's right, but I'll answer the question as asked. Come up with a pithy short URL.
Yeah, so you do have a URL issue. So I build URLs for most of my QR codes. You'll notice if you see the one here. If I put this one up here, this has got a QR code to it, but it also has the URL right across the top. And there's a reason for that. One is it's easy for you to remember. So even if you can't get the QR code or you want to go later, ask officehours.global or ask something.live or other things like that. It makes it a lot easier for people to just grok it quickly and type it in if they can't get it. Android phones are kind of broken when it comes to this. Like we just have so many problems with Android phones when it comes to QR codes. I know that we don't. It's also because we like to be creative and we don't want to do it the exact way that QR codes work, and most of our clients don't want to either because it looks ugly. So if you do it ugly, then all the Android works work. If you make it all creative, then half of them don't work. And so we put the little URL across the top to get that to increase the effectiveness of the QR code. I use it a lot, and the number one thing that it comes down to is this simple equation that action occurs when possibility is greater than circumstance. That is the math. That is the equation. People will do things when what they're going to get out of it is going to be greater, even a little bit greater than the circumstance. The QR code has lowered the circumstance a lot, but you still have to have a possibility. Why are they doing that? Why are they, and I've done stuff where I do things in theaters where we put up a QR code. Hey, you can ask a question of the person that was in the movie by this QR code, and we will get 25 to 30% of every person in every theater in the live network asking a question, using that QR code, because the possibility is really high and the circumstance is very low. So just keep those in mind as you kind of look through it. Ryan Summers is here, and he's going to be joining us here in just a minute. But just a quick reminder, of course, that tomorrow we're going to be talking about color. CJ Cobell is going to be on, and he's going to be talking about basic color management inside of Resolve. So how do you actually get those things working? So he'll be joining us for the second hour. Friday we're going to have Q&A, and also on Saturday and Sunday. Saturday is kind of our R&D. We will have theoretically a headset, or I will be coming in via headset. A couple of us might. We'll see how weird that looks and check it out. Sunday, of course, is our introspection, and so those are the times when you can bring your comments, your questions. You haven't seen those here because we don't record them or send them out, but we talk amongst ourselves about what we like and don't like. So stay tuned for that. Welcome back to the second hour, and I'm really excited to have Ryan Summers here. Ryan has been a character animator on children's videos, created the visuals for industry-leading slot machines, and designed opening titles for some of the highest-rated shows on TV and some of your favorite feature films. And he is the creative director for SPILLT out of Denver, Colorado. And I haven't seen Ryan. We haven't been in the same space for too long.
I feel like you're my first virtual relationship. Does that make sense? It was a long time ago. I feel like it was almost a decade before we actually ever physically met in real space on accident. Yeah. But we knew each other. It was one of those moments. And was it NAB or SIGGRAPH or something? We're like,
we were at a hotel in LA, and I know we ended up sitting around talking. But we had definitely known each other remotely for a decade, and then we were like, oh, it's Ryan.
Exactly.
So Ryan, can you tell us a little bit, how did you get started in graphics?
It's so funny. It took me a long time to believe that it was a possibility, but it really was. I feel like I came around at the time of like Toy Story, Jurassic Park, Nightmare Before Christmas, and I was like, oh, those are all amazing. And then I was actually a chemical engineer, or going to school for chemical engineering actually. Right. And then somewhere along the way, I got snuck into a room and somebody showed me 3D Studio. Before it was 3D Studio Max, before it was a DOS-based animation program. And it was honestly, I tell people this all the time. It's the first time you hear people like Eric Clapton talk about like someone handed them a guitar and nothing happened. And then 2 years later, somebody handed him a guitar again and it was an instant flow state. It was just like he was ready for the thing handed to him. Yeah. It was that. And everything, I as to the probably fears of everyone involved around me, including my parents, it was art all the way, but art enabled by technology. And ever since then, it's just been a long time to find what it is I wanted to do. And I've had a lot of stops along the way, including Pixel Core, which I don't know if that's something we talk about anymore. But
yeah, we do.
But Pixel Core, and and that was really one of the first things before I made it to LA that really connected me to so many other people that had the same interest. And since then, it's been all over.
We kind of joke this is Pixel Core 2.0.
Yeah.
So you got into it. You knew that you wanted to do it. Where did you end up starting to work?
It's really funny. I went to school in Chicago, and it was kind of, in some ways, an animation hotbed. At the time I was there, there was a company that made a show called Veggie Tales. It was a direct-to-video thing back when we used to actually get direct-to-video. And for a good couple of years, there were pipelines coming into the industry. So my first year straight out of school, character animation for a competitor to that.
And you're doing that in 3D Studio?
I was doing it, in everything. I started off in 3D Studio. We switched to Softimage, actually, and we were one of the biggest studios when XSI was launching, actually. We had one of the first people to transfer over, which I still lament. I talk about ICE all the time. Whenever anybody tells me something about node editing, I still have screen captures of things it did better than a lot of node-based editors now. And then eventually I found my way to Cinema 4D, actually thanks to you, Pixel Core, back before Cinema 4D was even a whisper in most people's ears and kind of considered a toy by a lot of people. We got in on the ground floor with that. And I will say, you introducing me to Maxon and me working with Maxon at studios that were just starting to get into 3D, that's honestly, I feel like where my career got made, being able to get all the way up to TV shows and films and stuff I work on now. So it's been an interesting ride, and it's
so you got into Veggie Tales, and then where was the next step from there?
Really interesting. So we did that, and then the guys at Veggie Tales actually made a feature film, and they kind of over-leveraged themselves, and went all in, and kind of let the engine that was stoking them to be able to get to the point to make feature films. They placed a really big bet. And unfortunately, I don't think the bet really landed where it needed to. And, as that started to slow down, almost all the animation work that I had seen in the Midwest kind of just went away. Went to New York, especially went to LA. There were a lot of service studios that did 2D animation that kind of disappeared at the same time. It was just this weird mix. And I started going to gaming. I actually started, I went to a really big company that made slot machines, of all things. You don't think of that as gaming. But the company I worked at was the first company that actually integrated video screens and interactivity and touch-sensitive stuff and a bunch of things that we think of as kind of commonplace now. But this was even like pre-Farmville. There wasn't a lot of like
you're really building the interfaces, right? You're putting those interfaces together, and those are, I mean, there's a lot of animation. If you go to Vegas for NAB or something like that, all that animation, all those things have to be put together, and it's under a pretty, I imagine, a very technically limited. Like you only have so many colors and you only have so many pixels.
Yeah, it was really fun because it really let you focus on was gamer psychology and like audience interaction in ways that I think a lot of people outside of gaming weren't considering. You know, like we talk about now, like when you go on a Netflix, the amount of psychology and deep thought on which image is placed as a tile and how soon you swap it, or changing your YouTube thumbnail or your title for your YouTube video. I feel like a decade and a half ago, we were talking about that stuff constantly because you could do so little with the technology, right? It was pre real-time engines for things for like.
And if someone's sitting down in front of you, you've got seconds to make money. You know, like if they're either playing again or they're not playing again. They're deciding they're going to sit down at this slot machine or this gaming machine, and so you really have just it's really like almost a lower brain process.
Yeah, it really it forced you to start thinking, to be able to, you know, we built a lot of things into our games to be able to identify what type of player we had and make adjustments on the fly, right? Like there are some people who just want to zone out and lose the least amount of money as possible, but feel like they got a lot of value by sitting on the device. Yeah,
that's me.
But there's other people who want really high volatility experiences, right? And that goes down to what colors you choose, what types of fonts you choose, how fast you flash an animation from them, how much you give them perceived interactivity that could affect the outcome. And I feel like I was really lucky doing that because we now live in a world where everything is a touchscreen. Every surface, every device, everything you walk into is a possible experience, but it's all tied, deeply rooted in psychology. That like, a lot of people, when they're trained to animate, are thinking about keyframes and timelines and curves. They're not thinking about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and then so you moved from doing the games to what was your next step from there?
It's funny. I had a really, really crazy run from that company. I worked there for 6 or 7 years, and then I actually started going into of all places, the Chicago Board of Trade. I'm going to date myself, but if you've ever seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off and they're screaming in the pits, yelling back and forth at people, I was actually in those pits when they were still were around, right? But I actually went there because I really, again, inspired a lot by what was going on at Pixel Core. I wanted to get my hands on cameras. I wanted to learn trial by fire, being able to edit, being able to respond to viewers quickly. It was pre a lot of live streaming, but we had set up a thing where we actually would go on the floor, of the trading pits as fast as humanly possible, record something, get it back, edit it, and get it up. And we had, again, it feels so ahead of it. It's time. We had a newsletter that there was no MailChimp, there was no service, no Patreon, no Substack, but we would send videos to people who'd be paying $500 a week for basically alpha for Intel. And it was pretty crazy. It was a really great way to learn how to shoot under fire and to be able to make editorial decisions for someone who had just been animating before. And I packaged all that information, all that history, and moved out to LA a year later. And then it kind of took off from there.
Now, what did you do in LA?
It's funny. I was actually at a startup that was making yoga videos before that. It was really crazy. But I had a friend who was at a place called Imaginary Forces, which was on my, whenever anybody makes those trips out to LA, you have your hit list of one day I could.
Right.
And Imaginary Forces was number 1 or number 2. And they called me and they're like, can you get over here and do you know Cinema 4D? And I knew just enough, I was 2 days ahead of everybody else in the room to be able to be there and then find out what they needed and run that night and go on a Pixel Core or go to somewhere else and be like, okay, I need to figure out how to UV unwrap in Cinema 4D. But then I basically stayed at Imaginary Forces for 4 or 5 years. Rose up to being a creative director, and that's what were you working on there? A lot of it started off with a lot of grunt work. I think the very first thing I ever worked on was they pulled out an old PC and it had Sapphire on it. And it was the only PC in there that still had a hardwired node-based license for Sapphire. And I was working on the High School Musical launch trailer, but they were remaking the movie in China. So they basically had the same launch trailer, and they needed all the same type, all the same, but they needed it changed into, Mandarin. And I basically got put into a closet with this machine that barely worked, and it had the files left, and they had literally taken it out of mothballs. And from there, working on title sequences for TV shows, for films, video game cinematics. And then eventually, a big thing for me was experiential. Doing all this stuff for screen graphics, but finding ways to bring it to stages, to hotels, to shopping malls, to corporate centers, to hotels, all that kind of stuff, kind of blending everything that I'd kind of done before.
And with the when you're doing title sequences, what's the timeline? Like, how much time do you have to work on those?
It comes in one of two flavors. And my best experiences have come in the one you would not expect. 3 weeks before Pacific Rim is about to come out to theaters, we get a call from Guillermo del Toro and says, I don't have a lot of money. I have less time. But if you want to pitch me anything, I need a title sequence and I need a logo because I don't like anything that I've got so far. And you get in your car and you run to Universal Studios and you meet up with him and you sit for hours talking about ideas and you come back the next day with a ton of references. He picks one and you make it. And you're literally like, we were on the coloring stage and the sound stage with him with laptops, showing him while he's like in between cuts for like mapping everything score to film or going into the color and literally being like, is this the camera angle? Is this the right name to the right robot? Like literally day and date. And a lot of times it really is like, I think that one we finished 3 days before the film, went live. Like literally like it was like Tuesday or Wednesday.
When you say going live, is it you're then delivering it for a DCP or are you? Yeah. So
it's going straight into the edit to go to theaters.
Right. Yeah.
Like the Tuesday or Wednesday before the Thursday night midnight showing.
Have you ever had ones where you get halfway through the we've had a couple changes that we've made where half of the film is one way and the other half of the film is another. There was the whole like did Han shoot first in the original release when they re-released it? It had happened so close that it was half the film for a little while was still the other way around.
It's amazing. I can't tell you which movie it is, but if you did research, you could probably find it. But I have had friends who have actually shipped to DCP to final release, and that Saturday there's a call from someone to, you know what? We actually have to change the order of who's in the titles. And you might have seen the movie on Friday, and if you see it Sunday morning at a matinee, you are actually seeing a radically, in lots of little ways, different film than what was out on Friday. And I don't think a lot of people really understand that some movies there are actually multiple versions of the movies playing at the same time. Well,
but it is a little bit of a sending out the DCPs, right? I mean, it's still a FedEx or whatever away. It's a delivery, hot delivery out because these are people think of them as there is a mechanism to do it wireless. I mean, do it over the internet, but not used. I mean, from my understanding, there's still little cartridges.
Yeah, from my understanding, there are choice locations in certain places where you would want to be able to send something quickly that it still does that. But yeah, it is still a hot swap, which is why you could literally be there on a Sunday morning, see the movie, and then literally go to a theater next door. And because they haven't been able to swap it out yet, see a different version of the same movie with different shots, different color timings, literally different edits. It happened recently with Spider-Verse where they kind of turn the story into like, well, the movie is about multiverses, and but there are literally a handful of shots and some sequences that are completely different based on when you saw it in the theater versus like what the canonical release was when it was dropped on Blu-ray or DVD.
We had one where we did I had to do a thing with a junket where we had E.T.'s hand, and E.T. was like we were reproducing the shot where he right at the very end where he's about to and his little finger turn glows and anyway, and so we were reproducing that with a green screen so that press people could be in the shot with him and say whatever they want to say and everything else. So we made E.T.'s hand, but it was a DVD. It was celebrating the DVD release, 20th anniversary, 25th anniversary, 30th anniversary. I don't remember which one. Anyway, and so the funny thing is we looked at the hand and someone said, "Oh, the hand isn't right." And we realized, we made the cinematic hand, not the DVD hand, because they had changed the hand. Yeah. So I actually have two of those hands in my garage somewhere. of the two ET hands because we had to, because it was just slightly different. It was enough, but it was enough that someone who knew what they were looking at would be upset. So it was. So now, what are you working on now?
And now, so I'm at a company called SPILLT. After working at Imaginary Forces and a place called Digital Kitchen, I did some time freelancing. I actually spent 2 years at a place called School of Motion that was, again, like highly inspired by a lot of what I saw at places like Pixelcore or lynda.com, doing, but more for like motion design, but really doing a lot of online training plus community in a really like intensive way. I did that for 2 years. And then I had gotten the itch to like get back into it. And back into pitching, winning jobs, making stuff, assembling teams, especially because the just amount of technology that's hit our lives in the last 3 years was mind blowing. And I really truly felt like if I didn't get back into it, I shouldn't be someone who's teaching, because it seems crazy to teach online the way people teach in brick and mortar schools, where it's 10 years ago's technology and 20 years ago's experience. But also all the stuff that I had been into, character animation, storytelling, shooting live action, interactive, taking spaces and turning them like memorable places, that has come down to like the ground floor level capabilities for pretty much anybody that's interested in playing with art and technology. So that's really what the last year and a half at SPILLT has been, trying to chase that, along with all the normal broadcast graphics and trade show, stuff that any animation or motion design studio would do. We're really starting to chase after those crossroads places, those clients that are kind of a little bit more adventurous and are willing to kind of like go out and experiment. And then again, I just said it, but like there's this feeling in me that everybody needs a third space. Everybody needs a place that feels like magic could exist. The way maybe the first time you went to Disneyland, or the first time you went to a museum that had this thing that blew your mind as a little kid. Maybe because of COVID, maybe because we're stuck in front of screens. Those things are the transformative moments, the way like Star Wars used to be for people of our generation. You'd go to a theater and you'd be delivered to a world. That is not enough. It's great, but it's not enough for a lot of people now. So that's really a big thing we're trying to push at SPILLT, is trying to find those opportunities.
Are you looking at the Vision Pro at all?
Love it. I love it. A really good. There's a cohort of friends of mine that are madly in love with it. And if you ever get a chance to check out, John Lepore just put something out for it's basically like a spec video, but what he would love to see. He's a huge F1 fanatic, and he basically did this great demo of what his ultimate experience of being an F1 fan enabled by Vision Pro would be like. And it's awesome, man. It's basically like,
it was very, very cool.
Yeah, and I do think we could talk about Vision Pro for forever, because I do think there's a world where it will become the gateway drug to something that I've always almost scoffed or laughed at, in terms of like, I think VR has had 3 swings at it of being like the next thing, and it's never made it. I think it's a great tool. I think it's a great thing for us as like a pre-visualization tool, or a way to kind of get to a means to an end. AR has always been the thing that I've been super excited about, but I still think we're like 2 generation leaps away from it being commonplace. But Apple has the finally, and you've talked about this endlessly, Alex. Apple finally has the one company, or the one set of creatives that control everything, to the point where no one can tell them how or what or when to do something. So the Vision Pro coming out now at the price that's coming out, I think is actually perfect for them to have other people help tell them what the killer app is actually going to be, because no one's been able to tell me what like this thing. Like we all know what the killer app for this is. They said it was a phone, but it's the internet in your hand, right?
Yeah.
No one has been able
to.
Now the camera, right? Like video camera, like a pre-production suite, like VFX. But that, having the ability to create community in your hand that you never had before.
Yeah.
That's not what they sold us, but that's what it became. What that is for AR is, I don't know yet, but I think seeing things like that, like the Vision Pro, another friend of mine named Brett literally just yesterday put out a demo of what he thinks a perfect way to sell like Tesla Cybertruck vehicles would be. And it literally places you in the Tesla Cybertruck, and then you go to Mars. And it's something that like 3 people made. And it's really, probably more than anything, it's a spec piece. Like directors used to do music videos to get attention. But what you start hearing in your head when you start seeing this stuff, Vision Pro is very exciting. And I don't think we've even touched close to what it could be.
Yeah, and as someone who's been kind of in VR, doing versions of VR, all those swings, I was in the room with swinging. Yeah. I was swinging, and I think that one of the things that we found that was really challenging in those areas was really that you had a couple different things. Number one is you're just trying to get people to do it. So, like for instance, concert. I'm really into concerts. I love. I hate going to actual concerts, but I love the experience of concerts. And so VR has always been this thing that, that I enjoy. And I went to, the problem that I had was that I got spoiled very early. I was a music director when I was 21 years old, so I saw almost 1,000 shows in a handful of years. And I would see 2 or 3 shows a night. It was my job. I would go. I'd go in and watch the beginning of one act, then I'd go across town and watch the middle of another act, and then I'd go across town and watch the close of another act, and then I'd go to sleep and get up and do the morning show, and so for me, and then in all of those, if I happened to be there before or after, I'd hang out with the band and talk to them a little bit and get to, and just, get all these, great experiences. And so I had this experience of this is what music is like. And then when I left the music industry because it was bad for my liver, I suddenly was on the outside, and I was like, why does anyone do this? Like, why does, I was watching live, I'd seen live play for, they were playing for 50 people, then 200, then 500, and then 7,000 at Red Rocks. And I realized that about 300 is the number that I liked. So 50 felt a little austere. They were playing in this little bar in Pittsburgh, and it was a little austere. But at 300, you had this energy of everyone doing their thing and being part of it. And once it got over that, it started to feel like 700 in Boulder was like a little too much, and then 7,000 at Red Rocks was definitely too much. And so you didn't, it was no longer connected. And so. But the problem is that, so I'm always trying to think about how to recreate that in the music space. And so I've done a lot of R&D in that area. And the one thing that I think about for the vision is an example, and we've tried to do these for Meta. And the problem is we end up either going, hey, well, they're playing at this bar, but you can't put them you can't put the camera in the middle. You have to put it over to the side, and then it has to be up over here. And it's just kind of, it's a dorky place to have a camera, and so you don't get a great experience. And someone's like, oh, that's never going to work. And you're like, okay, well, and then, or they hand it to a LA director who wants to tell a story, and so they now want to move the camera around and everything else. And they ruin the whole experience because there's a thing like, I want to sit and just feel like that artist is playing for me. If you look at like Monday, we had Glenn Phillips from Toad the Wet Sprocket on, and he's just got a wide angle shot in his house, and it was great. And what I want is that, but in VR, like I'm sitting there, And I think that we're going to start to see those kinds of experiences, popping out. And I think that now that it's going to be a lot easier to publish. One of the problems with the headsets in general has been it's quirky to get them on the headset. So when you're trying to figure something out, it's hard to get it. It's hard for me to quickly throw something on a Meta headset. It's not something that, and with the Apple, the Vision Pro, I can shoot something with my camera and literally just shows up in photos. And I just open it up and there it is. And so I think that that's going to be different.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Those cameras are in the Vision Pro too. Yeah. Again, you just think of it as baby steps, right? Like when you first tried to start live streaming versus today, and the short amount of time that's actually really been. And the capability change. Imagine being in that 50-person arena or whatever, the bar, and 5 different people have 2 generations from now glasses that are essentially doing the same thing, but it's spatially capturing everything. And you could literally, I'm forgetting the name of the film, but there was a James Cameron film that his wife directed that is like so prophetic now, where you basically like record people's memories and then play them back, and you can sit in them, right? And you can experience all kinds of crazy things. But imagine Dreamscape. Yeah, Dreamscape as well. Yeah, but imagine that live and your ability to hopscotch between any perspective, and the drummer's wearing it, right? And the videographer who would normally be sitting at the camera in a hard cam is literally in the crowd. As part of the crowd, and you can just have whatever you want. That intimate experience, well, you can pay to be right up front. Right. You don't care where you're at, and you want to just have somebody randomly place you around it. There's a song you want to be next to Bono in the sphere while he's singing it to you, that stuff. And it's not, like you said, authored by someone else for you, but it's literally a switcher like this show. Well,
and I find myself not less and less interested in the edit. I'm more interested in just the experience of I'm sitting here, and when it edits, it becomes a film, and when it just sits there, it becomes an experience. But I have to frame that and build that experience really carefully. But I think that's going to be really one of the things that this since you were in Pixel Core, this is what we were trying to get to, like what you see this morning, because the idea that we could all sit around and answer questions, and we were doing that in V-Bulletin. But this experience of all of us, being there. But part of what makes this work, of course, is that we invested in our studios, and so it looks good. It's not a bunch of virtual backgrounds and blurs and, bad audio and everything else. and so I think that is one of the, I think that the thing is that we, if we can get there with a lot of these things, and the interactivity is really interesting, because another problem we had is, I got to build an app if I want people to ask questions. I don't have to do that. I can open up the Q&A system that we're using here, which we're about to go to these questions. I can open up this Q&A system just as a window over here while I'm watching the show that we're doing here. And I think that's going to be, it's going to be fascinating. It's going to be fascinating what's possible there. So
I think what you hit too is like I encounter this all the time in the world of like marketing, is that people like to try to tell you that there's a generational divide into how people want to be talked to or experiencing things, and I think it's it's a deeply personal choice, right? Like some people want that authored voice where someone is talking to you, right? Like I go to a movie and someone is talking to me through their tools. There's other people who are like, I just want to listen. I just want to be in a space like you were saying, and I want to listen where I want to be, and I want to take it in. And it's not an alpha state. It's not passive. You are still physically somewhere. There's other people who want to lead and be the person telling the story. And that isn't like a generational thing, right? It's not like boomer to zoomer to millennial and like these are the categories. It's an individual choice at a different time. That's what we're kind of opening up people to have the capability to have the experience of their choice, the way they want it, how they want it, when they want it.
Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and jump into some of the questions that are coming in.
First one comes from Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada, and Dave says, Alex often speaks of innovation in 3D when they first saw layering. Do you have a special moment when you first realized the potential?
I think it's two things. For me, one was you have this moment anytime as an animator that sounds commonplace as an animator, but until you actually experience it, you don't know what it's like, right? So like to make anything move, let alone breathe and act, you have to do a lot of work to get there. And when you go to school, it takes a long time. But the moment for me that was like a trigger thing was in 3D, you can build things called blend shapes, where you basically build every possible, like either down to the granular level of muscle movement or just emotions. And you get exhausted trying to design something, and then you have to model it, and you have to go through the experience of rigging it and skinning it, all things that are like technical, boring, and hard. But the moment you actually take a character that you've been living with and thinking about trying to bring it to life, and you move a slider and it blinks and it smiles and it turns and looks at you, and you created that, and you're in concert in a conversation with a non-living thing that you're breathing life to, that was the aha moment. That was like, I would imagine like when Green Day learns power chords for the first time and they're off, right? But it took them getting to that point for someone to show them, or trying to do it. The other thing that I would definitely say that I've had very recently is there's a new web-based animation application that's in the vein of After Effects. It's called Rive. But the biggest thing that it allows, besides the fact that it's just through like a website, imagine having After Effects, but it's in Chrome. It has this thing called state machines, and for programmers it's probably very normal, but for an animator this is a foreign concept. But it essentially allows you to do anything and then wait for interaction, and you click or do something to trigger it, and it triggers your next animation. And it sounds trivial, but as an animator who's never been able to make their own games or make something that allows an audience to physically interact versus just like a rendered QuickTime, that has recently been another one of those magical moments of like, oh, as a no-code animator, I can literally make a video game or a character that reacts to everything you do. And it is very much in its nascent state as a tool, and it is growing really quickly. So those are the two big moments for me so far. One from a long time ago and one like literally yesterday.
Would you say that like the time at Veggie Tales, I think one of the things that for me, for video production or live production, the fact that the resolution for Hangouts, so we did all this video production for Google for, to go into Hangouts. The fact that it was low resolution, not very stable, and kind of, crunchy, gave us an enormous, but we had to do 3 to 5 of them a week, meant that we were able to experiment where it was a little safe for it not to be perfect, but it was also, there was just so much of it that you learned so much because you weren't caught up, because as it gets bigger, you can't make any mistakes, you can't have anything. And do you think that in the same way that Veggie Tales for you were, was it's direct to video, it's not a feature film, until it was, but a lot of that was just a grind and you're doing lots of it and you have a little bit more room to work. Was that a good, I mean, from a learning perspective?
Absolutely. I think I talk a lot about just the psychology of being a working artist now. And as much as there are so many positives of like the internet and the ability to learn everything because it's all on YouTube and all the hardware and software, Alex, like you could talk forever about how expensive it was to even try to do it, right? Like there are so many gates that you had to hop just to see if it's something you liked. There's also the negative side of like always, to extend the music metaphor, imagine trying to learn power chords in front of 50,000 people. Right, like there's that idea of like people have this constant pressure on Behance and Instagram and YouTube and TikTok and everywhere that like you have to present the perfect version of yourself, to the point now where I actually am trying to teach as many people as I can, like buy a sketchbook and never show anything to anyone, because you almost have to craft a safe space where you can make all of those mistakes. You know, one of the biggest things I run into in my industry is that there's almost no one with a voice. There's a lot of people who know every single tool and the best tool to use, when to use it, how to stitch them together. And when I ask them, cool, so what are you going to make with that? It freezes them. It's a paralyzing question for a lot of people. And it's to the point now where I'm actually toying with trying to start a conversation. It's like we have too many creatives and we don't have enough artists. There are a lot of people who understand the tools of being a creative, but there's very few people who have been like even let down the path of like, what are you going to do with all this? Great. Like, cool. Like, do you want to be on this continual grind of learning every single tool ever made? Or do you want to actually make something that speaks to someone and make some money while you're doing it? I definitely attribute a lot of that. Is like a lot of me learning was I didn't have the pressure to learn a tutorial in 3D Studio Max and post it on Instagram and hope I get, a job out of it 3 weeks later. So yeah, I would love to find more ways to get people experiencing that.
Next question.
Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, is up next. In what new places do you find audiences today that has not been accessible previously? And how have modern audience expectations evolved in the modern age of media saturation and lower attention spans?
That's a lot to unpack. That's a dissertation. I will say, again, I feel like, Alex, somehow we're getting back to music all the time. I think it's been amazing. When I was a kid, it was always, maybe Alex, when you were coming up, it always felt like every summer a major band would come through the city, in Chicago where I lived, and everyone stopped and everyone went to Soldier Field and they saw Madonna or they saw Bruce Springsteen or whoever it was that year was like the band that you had to go see or the musician or the performer. Now I feel like a lot of people lament that, like, oh, there isn't this, like, other than Taylor Swift in the moment right now. I feel like why she's so popular is she does bring a lot of people to the same place. Besides that, there haven't been a lot of like culturally unifying forces in entertainment, right? Like we had those 2 Avengers movies and they were a moment and we've never been able to recapture them. The converse of that is that I feel like so many more people now have the opportunity to both see themselves reflected in the art that they take in and also put themselves out. Thanks to Substack, thanks to Kickstarter, thanks to Patreon, thanks to low-cost, no-code tools that let you kind of dream up things and put them out in the world in a way that can be very experimental, that doesn't require you to have a mysterious benefactor. That isn't talking about like a specific like technology or a tool in terms of like Houdini or Touch Designer. But for me, that's been the exciting definition of this generation that we're still trying to sort out. Like how as a society do we move forward when we don't all have the same touch points, but all of us have a touch point? Right, like that to me is again probably more psychology than technology or art, but they all mesh together. That's the most exciting thing for us to figure out. I think at this stage.
I was amazed for some reason last night. I was really taken back. I was introduced to someone they have a YouTube channel called The Icing Artist, and it's just about icing. They're out of I think Toronto, I went up to their YouTube channel. It's 3.5 million viewers.
Yeah,
watching them do icing, and I think that it's we have a lot of challenges in our industry.
A Zamboni icing?
No, like icing on cake,
like a cake.
It's a cake. She's passionate about cake icing, and there's 3.5 million people watching, or subscribing to that, and I think that what that points to is just it's never been better in a lot of ways as far as expressing the thing that you're interested in. That those micro audiences there's not 3.5 million people in Toronto that are interested in icing, but there is in the world, right? And so the thing is how do we, I think that what we're always looking at, how do we make sure that they know that that's out there and they know where to find that, where to find that. And I think that's where we see that in YouTube probably more than anything else is just these incredible verticals. I'm interested in something very odd and weird, and I can find another 2 million people that are interested in watching it is amazing. It's just amazing.
And the thing that I think is great about that is that it doesn't have to be 2 million. It could be 1,000 wildly passionate people that will give you $100 a year. And there's the mechanisms and the platforms to be able to do it, to get, to spread it and to show other people how to do it as well, right? Like that to me it makes for a much more complicated landscape. Like even for something as simple as comic books, I don't even know where I go to find the next comic book I should be reading, because there isn't a industry standard. Like you read this magazine and here's the 10 things everybody is reading, right? Or whatever. Right? I just Sundance just happened and I didn't get to go, but I talked to so many people who went. And each person's experience of something as like straightforward as Sundance was radically different, right? Like the 8 movies they saw were, and of all the movies, even at something like Sundance, how many will actually even get, pushed out to the greater world? It's fascinating. It's a fascinating problem to try to solve.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. What specific considerations come into play when designing content for the casino slot machine market? Are there regulatory compliance issues that come into play?
There are, yeah. I mean, this is 10 years ago experience, but I imagine it's the same, if not more elevated. For us, it really was about gamer psychology, and it was 2 things, right? You either had a locals player or you had kind of a vacationing player. We had different terms for it, but there's somebody, again, who wanted high volatility, which they could, lose $100 in one button press or one pull, or there's people who could spend $20 and have it last an hour, right? So for me, it was amazing to see what kind of considerations in terms of interaction, what things you allow them to do. You couldn't, one big thing is like it couldn't actually be skills based, because theoretically, if you created a skills based environment for a slot machine, there would be a way to, someone could theoretically be better or worse. But people always want to feel rewarded, right? When they're playing, right? Like I think that's a lot of entertainment, is that people want to feel rewarded. And I think that's why you see all these second screen experiences really taking off everywhere. Like one of my big claims to fame is I was one of the people who came up with the idea for Talking Dead, the Walking Dead after show. It was the first after show that literally captured the audience immediately after the Walking Dead episode ended, and they basically did a broadcast version of a bunch of people on a couch talking about it. I made the show that kind of like helped kind of push that forward. That reward for being involved and being knowledgeable or having ideas, that was very much in play for something like slot machines, right? Like where you could literally be like, oh, I pressed this cloud 3 times and a rainbow came out, and the next time I hit spin, I won $50. Right. So that was a thing that like we were always dancing the edge with regulators of how much can we have perceived skill versus something that was actually skill based in terms of a picking game or, those kinds of things. But it all comes down to game mechanics and psychology, which, any game you play now, small or large, has, a heap full of that stuff kind of built into it.
Next question.
Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, up next. How do creatives deliver authentic story experiences in an age of deep fakes and AI tools are ubiquitous? What timeless elements should be included in any evergreen content, regardless of the medium?
We haven't talked about AI that much, but I think it's, again, another topic you could spend a week talking with, 10 different people, and the next week it's totally different. For me, I hate calling it AI. I don't even really like calling it machine learning, because it really, as it stands today, on this day, what I feel and see is that it's a giant averaging machine. It basically like you can take the sum total of everything, which is astounding, that you could have access to so much data, and then it can predict what the average kind of reply or response would be, and then create variations of that, right? No matter how fast that gets, no matter how realistic it gets, no matter how great it gets at temporal coherence across animation, it still isn't you today as an artist. And I think what we're going to see, we mentioned Sundance, I think there is going to be a resurgence to, this sounds so weird to say, artisanal art, for lack of a better term, like something where the human signature is readily apparent. I was just talking to someone recently where there's a new Ghostbusters film. I forget, it's Frozen something. And I was so excited because it's combining, this new school kind of like Goonies version of Ghostbusters and Paul Rudd and then some of the old Ghostbusters. And they're going back to New York, right? Like they're going back to the firehouse. There's a lot of, I don't like nostalgia, but for some reason, Ghostbusters hits me in the feels for some reason. But I watched the trailer super excited. About halfway through, I had to stop. And I'm like, I don't think this is going to be for me, because everything was super smooth. Everything was so digitally clean that it had no artifice. None of the artifice that like filming with film in New York would have taken. Like you couldn't move a camera the way they move the camera now back when they made Ghostbusters. And I love new things. But for me, I feel like there's going to be a return to like feeling the hand of the artist in things the way you had to because of the technology before. There's going to be even so much more of like, we talk about adding grain and adding, lens flares after the fact and camera handshake. I think in every piece of art, there's going to be so much more of that, whether it's your personal voice and your obsession and the way you talk and the things you love, or the actual way you make the films or the way you make the animations. I think there's going to be a huge resurgence. And maybe this is just me wishful thinking in a 2D cell animation. Just seeing somebody like Miyazaki actually get nominated for, a 2D cell animated film against something like a Pixar film. Super exciting to me. Even if you watch something like Spider-Verse, the amount of handcrafted work that also literally used AI at the same time that melded into those two things. I think it's going to enable people to do more. I think there's a whole boatload of ethical and economical things that have to obviously be sorted out. But I think it's also going to force people to think differently. The same way when a camera came out, that didn't mean art stopped. It meant that we got a lot of different art forms that wouldn't have existed had a camera not pushed us forward. So
my kids watch a lot of, I guess there's a new Netflix series that's going to try to do The Last Airbender again.
Yeah.
And so it's got very impressive graphics. And my kids, though, have watched all of those, in the original, the original Japanese versions.
Yeah.
And my daughter was like, I just don't want to see that in 3D. Like she was like, I don't think that they can capture what I watched. And she watched it, and it's not. And you think that they're gonna that big audience is gonna want to run to a more realistic version, but she was just like, "That's not the experience that I have. I just don't know if I don't think it'll translate." And I think that's going to be one of the real challenges. And I think that, I do think that we're gonna. I will say that I use Midjourney all the time. Yeah. Mostly as a brainstorming idea, like give me some ideas that I can think about, or I use it for. I use Midjourney a lot for sending out funny images to people. And then also spec stuff. So, I'm thinking about like what I was thinking about. I had to design I'm working on a music space for more concerts and so on and so forth. And I just said, I'm looking, concert space, I gave it some parameters of the kind of thing I'm looking at. And I produced hundreds of views. And I'm not going to use any of them, but it let me think about, I really like what it did with the windows there. And I really like what it did here. And I like this. And I couldn't tour that many spaces, like to go look at them. And we have to realize that for the most part, most people's music spaces, bars and little venues and stuff like that, most of them were a series of compromises. Like they weren't what they wanted. It was like, this is what we can do in this space. Yeah. And so just, going and looking at when it doesn't, not constrained, I think it's really a lot of fun. But I do agree with you that I think that there's even, that when they talk about we're not using any visual effects in Tenet or in something like that, which they, of course, are using visual effects in every show. All it meant is we spent enough money in Oppenheimer so that you can't see it, but they did do more physical. And we can see that, like the problem with the Avenger stuff and a lot of the other things is the lack of physics, and that comes, and I was talking to a visual effects supervisor who they did some physical items in their show, and it immediately said they had to bring all their CG up. Like there was a lot of things in CG they were doing when they built one of the ships physically. It showed them like it didn't cut with the CG ship anymore, and they had to up their game.
Yeah, I mean that's an ongoing, continual conversation that I think the no VFX movement and the kind of like. You can almost chart the course where a director gets on a property and like, we're going to do it for real this time. And then it gets around like Emmys and Oscars time, and they have all the stuff that they brag about it. But then at the same time, they have the VFX bake-off where all the VFX artists that worked on said movie are showing all the work they did to make you not think that they did any VFX. Right. And then that ends up like blowing people. John Wick 4 is a great example, right? Like there's this whole bicycle chase around in Paris where it's like almost every environment was completely CG, but you never knew that, right? Napoleon, right? Napoleon, even Ridley Scott was like, we didn't use VFX at all. And you see artists posting things where it's like, the close-up of the shot as the cannonballs are hitting the ice and there's actors falling into frigid water. Guess what? Full CG shot. It's animation, right? Like it's literally frozen ice created in CG, characters that they're doing motion capture, cloth that they're doing everything to get all the interaction. And you're like, oh yeah, like no VFX, it's all VFX. It's almost a guarantee that if you hear a director say, we're doing it for real this time, we're doing it all physical, it's like the canary in the coal mine that like there's probably more CG and VFX than any other movie you're probably checking out at the time.
Absolutely. Next question.
Roscoe Jones from Madison, Indiana. Do you ever select music in advance to help bring life to your animation? And if yes, where has this impacted your work the most?
It's honestly one of the biggest lessons I took, and not to name drop, but when you get to work with amazing artists, they remind you that all the time, that it's actually one of the best starting points. So much so now that when I teach people to create demo reels, so much of it is like your music choice, that you're not cutting to the music, but you're creating an emotional connection to a viewer first by music, and then everything else kind of adds on top of that. But I do think for most visual artists, it should be 51% visuals, 49% audio when you start. Most people, it's like 98% visuals and 2% the last day for sound and for score. And it's a huge kind of like a alleyway that most people don't go down. It's a huge blind spot. But every time I've ever worked with a filmmaker, they will almost speak in musical terms first when they're trying to ask you what to do. I want there to be a flourish here. This is like punk music where it's really loud, peaked, full black, and then I want it to go quiet. And you're talking about a title sequence. I'm like, what do you... Right. It took me a long time to translate those kinds of discussions to realize like that's a tool that most people working in motion design and visual effects and even animation, it's something that they could really spend a lot more time trying to figure out like how to start with that first and then build on top of.
Next question.
Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada is back with this one. Do you storyboard as much these days as you might have in the past?
I storyboard more. I storyboard, and in ways you may not necessarily expect. There's a lot of versions of what storyboards. You might hear people say animatics or ripomatics or storyboards. To me, and this is what I teach all my artists, the sooner you can get something onto a timeline, the better the rest of your production will go. Whether it's literally writing out like a beat sheet, like a visual script, like here are the things I want to have happen, and here's how I would describe it, and take that type with the type tool in Premiere, white type on black, and literally slug it out with music, even if it's taking like the score from like the Avengers movie, and just start to build something that is not on paper, that's not in your head, but on an actual timeline where you're going to do your real work. And I mean, it gets to the point where I think the most courses and classes and discussions I have now are with storyboard artists. And because that world has opened up so much, it used to be a black box, but so many people working on film and TV are selling courses on Gumroad and getting on places like Project City to kind of teach the approach. To me, it's like a golden age of information that never used to be talked about at all. It was a hard thing to break into.
Yeah, I always talk about, being careful about where you pour concrete. As soon as you start building 3D models and everything else, I mean, a lot of times when we start building the models ahead of time, we're just pouring concrete on the ground. Like, I have no idea. Like, there's a little crack over here. Let's pour some concrete into it. And when we think about building our forms and designing them and really thinking about that, because everything is iteration. Like your thought process, you want to iterate that until it's done iterating as much as you possibly can, and then add a little more detail and iterate, and then add more detail, and then you're pouring concrete into proper forms because you knew where you knew where the building was going to be before you started putting walls up. And I think that's the challenge we get into.
It's funny. Guillermo del Toro, I was very, very, very lucky to work with him on Pacific Rim. It was only for a short amount of time, but every single moment with him, I was trying to squeeze every last bit of like juice from those moments. And anytime there was a quiet moment, I was asked, I was like, so what's the hardest thing about, like directing, like a visual effects film? And he's like, it's really hard because basically every hour I have 100 things asked of me. I have to say no to 99 of the right ones and pick the absolutely perfect one to say yes to. And that's, in my mind, hearing him say that, like his ability to iterate so quickly because he's thought so much before he ever even started a project, is a skill that's, I don't know where you go to learn that. You only have to build it through, like an athlete, through failing all the time and getting used to failing, and then building up confidence and vision to be like, no, here's why, no, and do this, yes. And be totally comfortable with doing that, 100 times an hour, 100 times a day. Like, it's something we don't talk about, I think, very often as creatives.
And it takes it really is muscle memory. I mean, I listen. My daughter plays a bunch of instruments, and I listen to her practice all the time. And I think we forget as artists that you can't just read a book or watch a YouTube channel and then do animation. It is hours of you making lower brain decisions about what you're doing that happen in a twitch. And that. There's not any way to, right now, we're not at the Matrix, there's no way to put that into your hands other than, repetition.
Yeah.
Next question.
Roscoe Jones, Madison, Indiana, back with this one. What should be the role of patrons in the world of animation? Are there still new stories in need of funding that are best told through animation?
There are more stories and more storytellers now waiting, needing, dying for your attention, your patronage, your money. There's a really interesting animator, and I forget the name of the show. It just showed up on Amazon Prime, and it became the #1 animated show like in the last 2 weeks. From a woman named Vizzy Pop, I believe is her name. And she was an independent storyboard animating person. I think she either did Gumroad or Patreon, and did a short, caught attention, created a huge audience, I think both through webcomics and animation, to the point where her audience that she was bringing this is the way, again, music, Alex. This is the way it normally used to go, right? Someone sees something and says, I'm going to put the golden touch on your shoulder, and we will develop you and help you develop your audience. And we will take a cut of every single interaction until you're big enough that you need to go and re-record your masters like Taylor Swift to break free from our clutches, right? The new thing is you go out and you build your voice, you build your audience, and you become so valuable because you can touch people we can't touch as a brand, as an agency, as a music company, whatever it is. We are touching you to be able to touch your audience faster. And it's a complete inversion, flip from the power dynamics of any kind of relationship with creative people than it had ever been, at least in my modern memory. So yes, absolutely. There are people everywhere online looking, starting stuff, building webcomics that want to create animation, that want to build small teams. And the tools and the medium to present that to you are all finally mature enough that I feel like there's a world where we could do a show like this that is just talking about great creatives to go out and support. And here, give them your money and get them on, have them make the passionate plea and follow them and be part of that success. Be part of that, like Alex saying, be the 50 people in the bar and you get on board with the journey to the 7,000 people in the arena. Absolutely. There's never been a better time for that.
Next question.
Roscoe Jones, John Snyder, Reno, Nevada's up next. What are some of the keys to breathing life into simple shapes without making everything too complex? Phil Vischer said that Veggie Tales started with a cucumber and a tomato because they were simple to draw.
Yeah, I mean, the two things about simplicity that I think are great is A, there's no intimidation factor. You can get into anything. You could literally take your phone, get Dragon Frame or a camera, and literally take quarters and nickels or draw a square and learn how to animate because there's no intimidation factor with simple things. But the great thing about it is you can inject life into that fairly easily. There's 12 fundamentals of animation, 12 principles that you can study. But really, the other thing that's great about, I think, simple shapes, that what Veggie Tales really did is that people could see themselves in it because they were non-specific, right? A child can see themselves in something that has eyes, eyebrows, and a mouth. They didn't even need hands. They didn't need arms. They're simple, clean, easy to read shapes. They specifically, if I remember correct, picked red and green because they're opposites in terms of the color palette. So they kind of did everything you were supposed to do to become wildly successful without a lot of sophistication. I feel like, as you start seeing things and you see people who can draw amazing representations of real people, that's great, but it's very hard for an audience there's almost like a barrier of entry when you're trying to create a story with things that are too detailed. It's my favorite thing to do with people that are interested in animation is take them through the bouncing ball exercise and then teach them how a couple extra things can take it from a ball to a creature or a character. Things like anticipation, follow through, adding one additional detail that makes it a little bit more specific. Again, talk about it forever, but simplicity is the key for this stuff, right? Like the pencil mileage that you would have to go through with something super detailed is prohibitive to you learning.
I had a very, very short time in art school, like a couple months before I was just like, I got more work and just kept going. But we did I remember doing the bouncing ball and they were like, okay, do the bouncing ball and it's got the thing. But then it said, okay, make the ball a character. And what we were left with is, mine was like it ran around and then it moved over here and then it looked over at you and then it moved over at somewhere else. And all the squash and stretch of trying to give it a character, then all you were using is a ball. Like that's all you had was a ball, and you couldn't use anything else. You could have a plane on with the ball, and that was it. And so you had to, and it was amazing how much in that constraint, how much animation we did. And I have to admit that a lot of us thought that, we laughed harder at some of those videos than we had laughed for any TV show we had seen because there were just funny things that people would do with the ball, anyways, it was interesting.
I love that because I think that's one of the purest definitions of the the how fast you can go from a technician to a storyteller. Right, because even in your situation, what you're describing is I had a ball and I learned how to make it bounce. I can teach anybody that. The next step is, what is the challenge that you're going to put in front of that ball to see how it reacts, and that creates character, right? Is there a hole in the ground? Is it a distance that it can't jump and it has to figure out a way to jump? Is it a sword that it's trying to pull out? Like there's so many things that you can start thinking about, and then you would instantly go from a technician with a set of tools that you've been taught, right? You have your screwdriver of anticipation, you have your hammer of follow through. You take those tools and you're like, wait, how am I going to get you to laugh? How am I going to get me to laugh? And then you immediately go into storytelling mode.
And it was funny. You think about time being elastic. When we did it, there was this getting it rigged and getting it all figured out about how you want to do it. And it was, and time was going very slow. It was just very, like, you're just like, oh my gosh. And you can't quite get it right. And now it's got polygons on one edge and you didn't do it right. And you get it all kind of, then you get it working. And then it's like a day disappears. Like it's just like that, because you're sitting there playing with it and it's like looking over and then it's trying to jump over something or trying to go over and it's like looking and then moving and then looking. And then you get into it and you see everyone, you can tell everyone's gotten to that mode because you see all their heads going like this, like trying to think about like, what is it going to do?
You physically, you feel it. I think the life of an animator is very interesting and compelling because you simultaneously live in fast forward and slow motion. Right. Like I never, this conversation is great, but I feel like I'm in molasses because I spend my life at 2.5 to 3x speed or frame by frame. Yeah. I very rarely in my professional life live in real time because it just doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Roscoe Jones, Madison, Indiana, back with 24 frames per second, or is there some other magic frames per second number that is better for animation, or is it project story specific?
Project story specific, canvas specific, increasingly becoming generationally specific. 24 frames per second was what it was because a hand could reliably crank at close to that, and then that became a standard because of electric currents. It's the reason why we have 24 or 30 or 24/9, all the different frame rates. Over time, we have felt that is filmic, even though it's a very crude frame rate. If you really think about it, there's so many things we have to do to make that feel, like something you could actually watch because of the temporal coherence. I think we are starting to have more and more conversations about, you have a generation of people who have grown up with video games arguing about 60 versus 120 versus like, I need a refresh rate that allows to match my input speed. Going back to the whole idea of like the world is experiential and interactive. We watched it. I remember when I went and saw The Hobbit Part 1 in HFR, and it looked like a Benny Hill episode. Gandalf, I actually left and went to the projectionist. I was like, are you sure this is what it's supposed to look like? Because anything just left or right looked comical. I have to say, I had this theory for a long time, and it was awesome again to see James Cameron do it. Variable frame rate within an actual projection that you treat like a high speed, a high frame rate, and a all CG camera moving through an entire thing, fight scene, glorious. It feels like a revelation. Two characters talking to each other, moving across the screen. So, once we have the ability to literally be like dialing in frame rate per shot, per moment, I feel like that is going to be a conversation that's going to come up more. It's going to be another paintbrush in the tool set, the way we were talking about stereoscopic 3D and shallow, or are we coming out of the screen, or are we sitting into the screen? I think variable frame rate, if movie theaters continue to be an experience that people want to see in mass, is something that's going to be a tool that you could use a lot more interestingly. Next question.
Robert Gramling in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Dumb question, but what's the insignia on your hat?
There's a really beautiful place. There's Little Tokyo in LA, one of my favorite places. It used to be a cart called Japangeles. They make a good ton of great stuff, hats and shirts. But this is the J. My wife's name is also Janice, so I always wear it as a nod to her. So
nice. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, during the pandemic, it was said that independent venues give artists their start. Do you think we'll ever see a tipping point where audiences will move away from elaborate productions back to more intimate environments to connect with an artist?
I think we already are. I think we're doing it right now. I think YouTube, I think TikTok, that if you actually, I always have this problem. People really have a hard time with math. They really have a hard time understanding the difference between a million and a billion. But if you really look, it is not linear. It's not just a lot of millions. It's a lot of millions. I think if you start really, analyzing, like Alex was just saying, 3.5 million people watching somebody pour icing on top of a cake. I think the responses to all these things, other than, people having phones in their hands so they can kind of those micro moments, to be able to just watch something while they're, waiting for the red light to turn green, unfortunately. But, like all those moments. The other thing is like, it is a return to intimacy and authenticity, for an overused word, right? Like, I want to get to know the people that I'm watching. I want to see myself reflected in the things I'm watching. And for all the different reasons, like, we haven't had that for a very long time. It was, the gatekeeping kind of allowed a certain type of, person with a certain type of life experience to broadcast that as if it was the only experience. So I think this is a perfect example of that, right? If a bunch of people want to talk tech, they can get together and talk about it, right? And I think we're already there, and the ability to make money and increasingly more and more money is here and coming even more.
Next question.
Dave Troutman, Edmonton, Canada. Do you endorse reading Understanding Comics by Scott McLeod?
Yeah, absolutely. I think understanding comics, I feel like it should almost be called understanding story. So much more than even something like Saves the Cat or all the other kind of like script writing things. I think it should be required reading for anyone entering into a creative profession. I think that, along with Rick Rubin, I can't remember the name of his.
Creativity.
The act of creativity. Right?
Yeah.
I think Understanding Comics and Rick Rubin's book, those should be absolutely recommended reading for anybody who's even considering like a life working as a professional artist.
I listened to Rick Rubin walking around a lake. Just every day, I'd listen to a little bit more of it, and it's just the most amazing book. And especially if you're just kind of walking and you're in an open space, you're not thinking about something else, and you can just absorb it. It's an amazing, amazing book.
Yeah, I will add one more book if anybody's interested, and I only bring this up because I refused to read it for about a decade, and I kicked myself for not, just because of the title, but the title's actually great. Austin Kleon's Steal Like an Artist, especially in the age of AI, and talking about like ethics and what is it to be an artist versus somebody who's taking advantage of an artist. Those three are almost like the holy trinity now for me.
It's great. Hey, Ryan, thanks so much for coming on. It was really great to have you.
It was amazing. Thank you so much. It's great to see you all.
We do this every day. I'm just letting you know. Like, you can come by anytime. We'll make sure that you know where the Discord is, but we'd love to have you involved more often. Maybe get you back every once in a while.
I love talking this stuff.
Yeah. And thanks to all of our producers who asked all those questions. So we had lots of producers viewing, asking questions from all over the world. We really appreciate. Can't do this without you. It's a really short show without your questions. Thanks to the panelists for being here to answer those questions in the first hour and be part of the conversation in the second hour. And thanks to the incredible team on the back end that is cutting this show, developing software that makes this show possible, figuring out who's going to be on it and working out, making sure that they're ready to go and all those bits and pieces. There's a huge village that makes this happen 7 days a week, 365 days, sometimes 366 days a year. And we really appreciate all of your contribution. We traveled in the Tlaloc Traversal. If we had wandered around asking these questions from each person, it would have taken 52,000 miles, 84,000 kilometers, and that is 413 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. That was great. Great, Ryan. I think he's frozen. Ryan's freezing. Are you there? Well, at least we got to the end of the show before.
Yeah, good timing.
Yeah,
perfect.
We had to lose internet. That was the best time to do it.
Yeah, perfect.
So, yeah, exactly. All right. See you guys.
Bye. We haven't finished the credits yet, so I'm going to hang on to leave the meeting until at least the credit roll is done. And we're there.